community. We've had a little bit of chat on Facebook about, we had a whole thread on the various old houses and which ones were the oldest and whatnot, and we'll have more, I guess, more threads, more presentations. There's just so much that the research team's been finding with people that have been contributing to the conversation. You know, hey, I know about this, or what about this? And then we start chasing things down, and it's like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. William Randolph Hearst has a connection to Orangevale. Oh, who knew that? That's for another conversation. But
I remember that for 2 years until you came into the hall. I was going crazy because I heard the story.
Yeah, yeah.
Years ago, and I couldn't find anything on it.
Yeah, so we found it. We crowdsourced the rumors and the conversations. We found some data, and we were able to piece that puzzle together, which was really cool to work with Pamela on that. And so we'll, again, share that at another presentation. Tonight's presentation, though, will be on the Calders. So William Calder and Mary Alice Calder, they were one of the earliest residents of the Orangevale colony. And so we'll get into the interesting history of the homes, and I will turn on my remote. There we go. All right. The Calders actually had 2 houses in Orangevale. The first one they built across the street where Orbit gas station is, and it was a Queen Anne Victorian. And you can see this was something that I just found at the Sacramento room, this photograph from an advertisement for the White House Inn. So if anybody remembers when this was the White House Inn, as part of their advertisement, the full page ad, not only did they have a picture of the White House Inn, which is this building, they had, for some reason, had a photograph of the Queen Anne across the street, which was built prior to this building, during its construction phase. And I'll have a zoom up of this in just a slide. So it's very interesting what you can find when you start digging for various information on Orangevale and different things going on. It leads to other information. It's very exciting to be able to dig into that. But we have here is the Calders in 1893. If we go to the original colony, right, it was incorporated in 1888. So from 1888, they started selling these parcels, the 10-acre parcels, and we have the grid. You know, Orangevale has that unique square grid that looks strange. Like, why is this one, area set up like a grid like that? And it was these 10-acre parcels, and the Calders had purchased 3 of the parcels, or actually 3 or 4 of the parcels. I think it was 30 or 40 acres. And in 1893, when he was here doing a production of a play, he was a theater person. He was managing a production called The Span of Life, and a couple of other different productions that he ran through the United States. Sacramento was one of his theater stops. And we don't know exactly how he heard about the colony. I don't know if it was McClatchy was at one of the shows and said, hey, you want to buy some land in Orangevale? We don't know exactly how he decided to purchase land here, but he did in 1893. And then we start seeing in the newspapers, this is the Folsom Telegraph mostly, because it was more local news. He was talking about, hey, I've got some plans for a house. I think I'm going to build a house here. Not only have the citrus groves, but we'll also go ahead and settle here after I retire from the theater. And down here, this is a picture from the Center for Sacramento History. You can see their stamp across that. It's not a very good picture because I just stole it off their website. But this is William and Mary Calder at the Niagara Falls. So it was one of their vacation pictures, I guess, that the Sacramento Archives has that was hiding out there. So there they are, and we've got a closer up picture of them coming up. But then in 1894, we finally have the discussion about the house being built and an archway. There was a gateway that he built first for the property. And it was something that was a little bit, he wasn't shy, we'll just put it that way. William Calder, London, England, was on his gateway. And that was the first thing he built on the property, was a nice little gateway to show that he was the owner of this Orangevale property. And then once that was built, they worked on the house itself. This is the White House Inn photograph that we'd found. One thing that's interesting about that is the White House Inn was took over in, I think, 1977, this building, and to have them show up with this picture in their advertisement tells me that must have been around in the house here somewhere. They must have found some photographs. We still have, 4 boxes, Marilyn, that are hiding in this 4D?
A bunch of them untold.
Oh, wow, okay. Which is our curating and archive team that we need help with, right? So there's a lot of stuff that we haven't even touched yet. We're just finding stuff in the archives that already exists. We have stuff in this building that we haven't even started touching yet when it comes to the historical documents that are available. So we're excited to see how much is in there. When you looked through the walkway there on the walls, the church has already taken out some of the photographs, and there's some interior pictures from when it was the Calder house, if you look along that wall on your way back out. So we think there's more stuff in those boxes, but we have to have the time and the manpower to be able to, people power, excuse me, to be able to get through that information. So yeah, this has you can see the construction framing for the building. This is, again, not very shy. Down here, what I've done is I've put a little snapshot of the parcel maps. We have in the archives online, there's entire colony parcel maps from all the lots for, I think, late 1800s, 1900, 1912, 1918, 1919, all the way to 1925. That's when we end up losing out on parcel books, the Sacramento County parcel books. Some reason they stopped digitizing them in 1925. So that's as far as I can go when I'm looking at ownership on different parcels and what they looked like.
What size were the parcels kept at a certain size, like 10-acre parcels, or were they 20? I mean, that's always confused me, because I know that some of these guys bought, 20, 30
Yeah,
acres.
they had multiple, yeah.
They look like they're parcels.
Yeah. So from the Sacramento County perspective, they were all 10-acre parcels. So what you would do in the case of the Calders, they had parcel 249. They also owned the 2 south of that. So they had 3 in a row that they owned, and that was their 30 acres. And I think they actually bought a couple of other parcels like scattered around the colony as well over time. So you'll see the Calder name on a number of different parcels over the years, and then they'll sell those and you'll see the names change. So we have quite a few, at least for the early decades. We've got some good hints on who owned what and where they were. So when we talk about the Portwood home eventually, we know where the Portwoods owned the property, and so we can kind of guesstimate where their fire-ravaged house was actually standing. So that's an example there. So for us here, this is where the Queen Anne was. So that's right across the street. That was parcel 249. And the parcel we're on right now was, I can see that, 230. So whenever we're looking at real estate transactions in the newspaper, they usually say the tract number. So we can look and say, okay, Mary Calder sold to such and such, tract 249, or they bought 249. And then we can go back and say, okay, which one was that? And we can kind of correlate that with where the houses were. All right, timeline. So we have the house completed in 1896, 1897. I don't have an exact date. We have we have a discussion about it being ready to be done in 1896, and then we have his an actual announcement here about his home, and they'd been moving in at that point in time. And then we have the parties. They start immediately after they move in. They were quite, I guess, maybe theater people like to have parties. I'm not sure. They had a lot of teas. They had a lot of socials, a lot of dances. We could go on for nights and nights and nights talking through all the different social events that happened at the Queen Anne. And then, of course, when they moved in here, happened here at this house. So a little bit about the 2 characters we're talking about this tonight. Mary Alice Calder She shows up on the parcel maps mostly. They were under her name. They did a couple of transfers over the years between Mary and William, which was kind of interesting. I don't know if they were doing it for tax purposes or what, but she had her name on the parcels most of the time during their stay in Orangevale. She was born in 1850, died in 1936 in Berkeley. Their time in Orangevale is from 1897 to 1929 for Mary. And they were theater people. So she was a Shakespearean actress. They met while they were doing theater. William had come over to England, was doing theater. They met, they got married, they had kids. Their son was already moved out and married by the time they ended up coming here to pretty much retire at early 50s. But he moved over from England as well. He moved into San Francisco with his wife at the time. And then they had a 20-year-old daughter that was living with them in the 1900 census, which Chris Gerard, who is a longtime resident of Orangevale, she now lives in Arizona, is it? Yeah, so she's remotely helping us with the research, and she has ancestry. Her and Kay did a ton of research to figure out if we had any descendants that we could get a hold of for the Calder family, and we ended up with a dead end in the 60s, 50s maybe, Kay, or?
Yeah, Kevin, it was in the 50s.
Yeah.
With the daughter, and then they had two granddaughters.
Yeah.
They passed away too.
Yeah.
That was very early in life, in 1935 or something.
Yeah, so we ended up with no descendants once we got past the granddaughters. We were kind of hoping there would be somebody there that might have some more pictures, data information, heirlooms, whatnot, but we did not find anybody. Yes?
Danielle owned it. And I think when you get down to the paperwork that's downstairs,
Uh-huh.
he used to have a history on it in the lobby.
Okay, so when we go to the documents, we should see a history of the building.
Of when it was built, what their deal was this was going to be a place for
We'll have more details. Yeah. So yes, we have a previous employee of the Daniels restaurant, Daniel Country Living, Country Life restaurant, I think it was, or something like that. Just Danielle's. Okay. Yeah. So we have some more interviewing to do and get some more history of the building.
Where was Danielle's? Here, was it this place?
That was one of the restaurants.
Well, I know several that it was, but I hadn't heard of Danielle's, so.
Okay.
Was that the tea house or? No.
Yeah, so we'll get to that. I have a whole line there. So Mary was heavily involved, as you can already see, in the community. She had the original women's club was founded with Mary Calder as one of the officers, maybe even president, I'm not sure. Yep, 1913. And I think originally it was the Country Life Club, and then it was like the Study Club, and it changed names a few times. She had a sewing club, she had a bridge club. She went over to Folsom to play bridge, so she had some friends over there who crossed the bridge and check it out. I saw her in some PTA events during World War I. There was a Red Cross chapter that was helping with items, so she was involved with that. I'm already exhausted just from seeing everything that she was doing. It was amazing. Theatrical fundraisers. So they paid off the debt for, and we'll see that with William, for the Presbyterian church that was in town. They had a property debt, and they put on a show in Folsom and raised the funds to pay off the church's debt. So that was one of the first things that they were doing when they came into town. That was very nice. And then, we talked about the socials and teas and whatnot. Colonel William Calder, he actually was in the Civil War on the wrong side of the war, the losing side. He was born in Scotland. His family moved to North Carolina. He grew up there, went to military school, ended up in the Civil War. After the war, he survived. They moved to Chicago. He started getting into theater. Chicago fire happened. They moved on. He ended up getting into theater productions. He bought the rights to some shows. One of those was The Span of Life. And we have a playbill. I printed out the playbill from the Philadelphia show for The Span of Life. It's on the table out there. And you can see what the playbills looked like back in the day. But he made a good amount of money doing the theater production thing, and was able to buy his retirement home here, create the Queen Anne across the street, buy the 30-40 acres, put in the orange groves. He got heavily involved in the Orangevale Fruit Growers Association. He was the champion in 1916 of the original clubhouse that was at where the Chamber of Commerce is right now. So that little corner lot where AutoZone and the Chamber of Commerce was, that was the original clubhouse. So he did fundraisers. He really championed having a place where the community could come together and have shows and put on plays and have activities. So really community minded, which was great. It helped Orangevale gel as a neighborhood, again, a community. He was a board member for the Orangevale Water Company. We are still waiting to get into the vaults at the Orangevale Water Company. They have, of course, a ton of history on Orangevale. They were tied at the hip between Orangevale and the water companies, so they will have a lot of information, maybe photographs, different things that we haven't seen yet. And so we have a request in. I think it was the busy season before the holidays, and so probably here shortly we'll have some contact there to start digging through some of that content.
You know people on the board at the water company?
I think, Marilyn, you do, right? Yeah.
I do too.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got an invite.
Good.
Yeah. So we definitely need more people to help dig through that stuff and make the context. Okay, good. Let's see. Then originally we didn't have a Chamber of Commerce until 1955 in Orangevale. So he was part of the Sacramento version of the chamber. There was the debt from the church, and then there was various dramas that came up in the community. There was a suggestion that maybe the Folsom prison put a prison farm in Orangevale and have the prisoners working the farm as part of their rehabilitation or learning a skill and whatnot. And there was quite a hullabaloo about letting that happen in the Orangevale community. So there were people on both sides. There was quite an article that found where they were going back and forth. And William seemed to be kind of just trying to orchestrate from the newspaper ad, kind of, okay, let's take a vote, and how many people are for this and that. So he wasn't really, from what I could tell, pro or con. He was kind of orchestrating the conversation for that whole drama. So it was kind of interesting. And I never we didn't have a prison farm, so I'm assuming that was the end of that. But it was interesting to see how he was involved to try to help the community get through those kind of conversations. And then alcohol at the time. Originally, Orangevale didn't have alcohol allowed. That was one of the things to attract the Midwest folks, like from Minnesota and whatnot. We had quite a few families come from Minnesota, and they preferred to be in a place that wasn't selling alcohol. So that was one of the draws for the original colony. And so there was some winery. There was one winery by Castleman that had started up and had gotten an initial permit, and then there was a second permit coming for somebody to sell alcohol, I think in a store, and then it blew up, and then so there was a whole conversation on that. So he was part of again, coordinating the conversations on that. And then when he retired, we're talking 1846 to 1928 is when he died. 1897 is when they moved in. They moved into this house in 1907. So from 1907 to 1928 was kind of like the more community involvement years. I don't see as much of him being involved with the citrus, the growing and all those kind of things. I see him more doing these kind of community type activities, including the clubhouse. So you see him kind of settling back from the farming and doing more of a kind of a retirement community activity things. And that included when San Juan High School opened, he was involved in one of the plays that was put on by the high school. It's like, well, it wouldn't be too bad to have a world-renowned, internationally acclaimed theater person helping you with your high school play. That's pretty cool to be able to have in the local community. So let's run on to the Queen Anne timeline. So again, we're across the street. 1907 is when they got this house done and they moved in to this house. They sold that house to a Mr. Birch, which again is a completely different thread. Mr. Birch is an interesting character as well. We will get to him at some point in one of our presentations. But he purchased that from the Calders, including the 40 acres at the time. And then in 1913, Mr. Birch sold it to the Bruners. They acquired it from him. He ended up serving in the war, World War I. He survived, I think, Pamela, if you remember, and then...
The community thought he had died. They put out a news thing, and then they came back and said, retract.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll have some more information on Birch. But the Bruners had it from 1913 to just 1916, not very long, just a few years. They ended up selling it to the Lamsons. That was one of the other families that had been around a long time in Orangevale. You'll see the Lamson name around. And this is one of those places where I have to have the tract number, 249. So that's the tract that the house was on over there. So I didn't actually have anything that said the Lamsons bought the Calder home or the Lamsons bought the Bruner home. I actually found the tract number in the real estate transactions to know when they were taking over ownership of it. And then finally, the longest owner of the Queen Anne across the street was the McNeelys, Earl McNeely. If you don't remember, he was the hero of the 1924 World Series, where the Washington Nationals won the World Series. He hit the home run, I believe, and he was from Sacramento, so he became the hometown hero, famous sports guy. And he ended up marrying a Greenhall, which is another one of the big families from Orangevale. They settled in and purchased the Queen Anne across the street, and they were there from 1928 to 1946 when they built a new home just back, just stone throws back from the Queen Anne. So
There's names of their streets back there with their name on it, McNeely's, but it goes that whole fence that's along there, and there's new homes.
Okay.
That used to be all their property.
Yeah, that was all McNeely property.
Talking about the barn that Larry was talking about it. And
Larry Neal, yeah, he had the barn, yeah.
They used to go get hay. I think his sister-in-law's husband bought, or his brother-in-law wound up buying part of that property.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll get more information. I'm looking forward to getting all those tidbits. So that's good. So McNeely's, so it's 1946. They went ahead and built a new home. They moved back there. They sold it to a family, the Kears family. They showed up at one of our tables at the food, the farmer's market. And the Kears had a bunch of family history about their time in Orangevale, and they shared that over email with our team, which was great because that connected a lot of dots right in this window here for the house. So from 46 to 56, the Kears owned the house. Originally, you can see here there's a silver T at Mrs. Kears in the social gossip section of the newspaper. So it appears that she was kind of looking to become the new Mrs. Calder in the community with the house. But based on the family history, there was a business transaction that went bad, a deal in Roseville where they lost their fortune to this bad deal with Roseville. And at that point, they couldn't keep the home. She ended up opening up a dining hall to try to cover the bills and whatnot. And then they finally sold it in 1956. And we see the mention of the Crescent House at that point in time in the newspapers. So it went from a private residence to an official dining hall, restaurant type setup with some boarding going on as well. So the Crescent House was the next iteration for the Queen Anne across the street. The name disappears, but we continue to have advertisements in the Sacramento Bee for the years 1958 through 1962. So we do a search on the address, which was 8994, I believe, Greenback Lane, and you'll see advertisements for room and board at this place. And we do also see, I think I have, it's on the other house, but we have, I have a couple of articles where somebody that was boarding at the house maybe did an opinion piece in the newspaper, and they had their address as the boarding house. So it was a way to see that somebody was living there and using it as their home. And then finally, there is no mention, I can find zero mention of that house being demolished. It just disappears from the records. It's like nobody cared. It just vanishes. So from 1962 was the last advertisement I saw for the boarding. 1963, we have the grand opening of the Orbit gas station.
I went into that house with my grandfather, and they were selling anything like mantelpieces.
Oh.
I remember that there was, my grandfather was coming and glued at the Italian marble.
Ooh.
I just bits and pieces that I remember, but they were selling anything, sconces, fireplace mantles, and everything out there. My grandfather went to look at the electrical, lightings and things.
So that would have been around 62, 63 then? Yeah? Wow. So, yeah, but you were in there, wow. You were at the end, you were in there. That's pretty neat. It's kind of sad, but neat to have. Yeah. So that was the end of the Queen Anne across the street. We now have the Orbit gas station, the modern space age arrived, and it's still here. I'm surprised. I did see in 2002 where it was potentially going to be changed into a chevron, I guess, and remodeled and redone, but that didn't happen, obviously. But yeah, it's still here, Orbit. One of my brother's first jobs actually was working at the Orbit gas station. He was pumping propane and doing different things there. So that's kind of a fun connection. So that was the Queen Anne, the end of the Queen Anne. And perhaps that disappearing helped maybe the villa. It might have helped this building, I'm not sure, to not just get bulldozed. Because once that Queen Anne disappeared, it's like, wow, that was a bit of history. One of the first houses in Orangevale that just got plowed over for progress. But this is the photograph in the, you'll see it over in the fireplace room when you first come in. I took a picture of this when we toured last week. So this is an original picture they took when they opened the house in 1907. We have here, we have a young lady, it looks like, and then we have two small children. And from what we know of the family, the daughter got married to Mr. Hollings, and they had two daughters. And so we suspect, at least I suspect, that this is the daughter and granddaughters posing in front of the house when it was first built. So that's kind of interesting. As you can see, there's a little barn back here, or a garage. You can see the original roof lines, and this is open right here. So you can see this open porch area, which is all enclosed now. So you can kind of compare that with what you see when you go around the tour.
And the tower that's destroyed now.
Yep, the tower is gone. So yeah, we'll see a few changes. So this is a retirement home, 1907 to this slides through 1937. But the Calders lived here from 1907 to 1929. Mr. Calder died in 1928. So about a year and a half, Mary moved to Berkeley to live with her daughter, and they sold the house to the Williamses. So the Williamses moved in, and then they were there for 3 years. So we had the Williamses. They built a big chicken barn. There was a news article about that. And then in 33, they sold it to the Dennis family. So it started changing hands pretty quickly. We had the McNeelys across the street that stayed there a while, but over here it seemed to rotate pretty quickly. The Irwins had it briefly before a foreclosure. We see the Specks picking up the property from the bank of Folsom, getting it from a foreclosure in 1937. Then they were there from 1937 to 43. Then I see the Todd family was there from about 43 to 45. And then we have the Roundtrees, which were the longest, I think, residents, 45 to 54, 9 years after the Calders had the house. So the Roundtrees did quite a few improvements. They did some remodeling, they did some redecorating. That's what it says around here. Whoops, the mid 50s, and we don't have an exact date. Whoops, there it is. This is actually from the Orangevale book. So if you ever are in Ace Hardware, you'll see the old looking book. It says Orangevale. This photo was from the fire station. The author had gotten a picture from the fire station of the fire damaged house. And we don't have any details on it other than the Roundtrees at this point disappear, and we end up seeing the home become a boarding house. So in 1954, you can see we have room and board at the Green Lane Inn, and it's here at 8999 Greenback Lane. That's the address of this house. So somewhere before 54, there was the fire, and it seems the Roundtrees probably didn't want to deal with it and maybe sold it off to have somebody else take care of it. I didn't find any details about the repairs when the fire was, but we might find more information on it later. And then we see it going through its boarding years. We've got the Green Lane, we've got the Harmony Manor, which is 61 to 64. So during the Harmony Manor, you see the other house get torn down, right, in 62, 63. So they were currently the Harmony Manor at that point, and they were promoting Aerojet, 15 minutes to Aerojet. They were looking for folks that worked at Aerojet to be able to rent a room while they were looking for either property or just having a place to stay while they're working there. Then it ended up just not even having a name for a while. There was just boarding available. And during that time, this is 65 to 1970 something, we see the White House Inn come in 1977. So between 1965 and 76, we have various boarding going on. And the only records I have there is I have a couple of drunk drivers that had their address at this place. One of the articles was, here it is right here. So Marion of 899 Greenback Lane was booked for drunken driving. So was Harry, also of 899 Greenback Lane. And that was the first time they met, was in jail. So that was the whole news article. The newspaper was laughing about these two people who lived in the same building, and they had never met until they were in jail for drunk driving. So that was kind of an interesting story for the house. And then we had another drunk driver at another year during that window that also came from this address. So there were a few people that were having some struggles, and they ended up getting famous. We can find them because we have articles about them. So that helps us at least get some timelines about what was going on in the building. And then at this point, 1977, we end up with the restaurant phase starting. This is the White House Inn, and we'll go into that phase now. Now here's a picture from that advertisement that we'd found at the Sacramento Room. So this was the White House Inn after they'd gotten it all ready and spiffed up to be a restaurant. And as part of that advertisement, there was the second photograph of the construction of the Queen Anne, which again, I have no idea why they used it, but we're very thankful they did, because we wouldn't know that photograph existed unless they had put it in that advertisement and it was in the Sacramento Room for us to look at. White House Inn was 1977 to 1982, from what we can tell from the records. Then we have in 1983, there's a permit pulled for a big addition to the building. And you can see the address here, 8999. They had a permit for a $108,600 upgrade to the building. I believe that was this room with the glass. This was all glass. We had like liquor, stacked up to the ceiling. Yeah.
Ladders to get the outdoor.
Yeah, so
Is that what they put in the deck or the filled in the patio?
they might have filled in the patio as well.
That's what they filled in the patio.
Yeah, so they got some more seating. So there were a lot of things done when the L.W. Calder restaurant was open. So there was a lot of additions to it and enhancements. That was for about 10 years, 83 to 93. And then from 93 to 2001, this is where Daniel's is in as well. There were a few restaurants in there. So
Big yellow house was in there, I know.
yeah, there was, it was a tea house, yeah. See, I didn't even find the advertisement for that. It was, some of them moved so fast, they didn't even advertise. Okay. Yeah, so we had the Victorian, we had the Country Table, we had Daniel's, we had Venita Ray's, and the Ambassador. And then in the middle of that, there were some other ones that you just mentioned. And I didn't even put the Buffalo, the last one that didn't even open, right? Yeah, they had to sign up, and it was, horrid color and whatnot. That wasn't even on here. This picture right down here is Venita Ray's had a artwork exhibit. Yeah, they had a piece of art done for the restaurant, and it's upstairs still. So that's a picture we took last week. It has a little Corvette in the front and the Venita Ray's picture, or Venita Ray's sign. So it's kind of a fun piece of art that's still upstairs in the soon-to-be completely permitted section of the building. Yeah, Sac County's still working with the church on the various renovations. They still have to put in a spiral staircase over here to allow for 2 exits for the upstairs before they can use it for the church officially. So those are some of the renovations they're still working on to get everything to full speed here at the church. So yeah, this is the restaurant phase. And then finally, it was, I can't remember who Pastor Mike said owned it before they did. It was some guy was just using it as office space. So it was just kind of sat here. Well, they had the wings sign, right? But I don't know if he was part of that or he just bought it from those people and he was just using it as office space. But yeah, so that's kind of the last bit before the church took over. The church bought it about four and a half years ago? Okay. Yeah, and so there's been a lot of work being done to get this thing back to snuff. So again, just a reminder, we have a donation bowl out there for just to chip in for their renovations and to really show our appreciation to be able to use the facilities and share this with our history project folks. So they have, they took it over in 2018. This is the Google shot. I just got off Google Maps yesterday. And they finally started services, I think, right before Christmas. So they are officially meeting in here. And so that's great. Glad to see the building back in action and being used for that cause. So that's the end of the presentation, but we, as Marilyn has mentioned, we have so many things. Orangevale history is really rich. We start going down rabbit holes, and it's with the research team. I mean, we spent just get the data for this presentation, we found a whole bunch of other rabbit holes that we'll have to go back to, right? We found all this data and we're like, oh wow, there's a mention of the Green Halls over here and they're doing this thing, and I'll have to come back to that. And oh, there's these people, the Castlemans, what are they doing? And Warhoftigs, or whatever their name is. Yeah, there's amazing all the different families that have been in the community, involved in the community. And the great thing is we are part of the community and we can be part of that same history by being part of the history project. So we'd really appreciate help with getting this captured. One of the things I think Brad Squires had mentioned was that a community that has a hold of its history is going to stay a community, right? If we lose that history and we forget about what happened here, we end up going to be pieces of us in Citrus Heights and Folsom, et cetera, right? It's just going to disappear as we lose that identity. This is one of the ways we can keep that identity And so we'd really appreciate your help in getting that done and getting it out to the rest of our Orangevale community.